Welcome to Birken Forest Monastery's live stream. I'm Ajahn Sona. And let's proceed. Metta, who's behind the microphone today, with the first question.
Yes, Ajahn, the first question today from the live chat is from Alex. Dear Ajahn, what would you do while wandering around the Canadian forests while living as a hermit? Where would you maintain your mindfulness? Or where were you thinking were you thinking most of the time? I am also curious about your afternoon and evening routine. What would you do returning from your walks?
Yeah, it's the whole business of being alone in the forest has been a theme for me in this life, because when I started as a child, the place where I was born at that time in the Vancouver area, and to this day is surrounded by forests and mountains and rivers and all of this stuff. And in the 1950s, when I was a kid, the suburbs were just an idea. It was more like farmland in the areas surrounding it, farmland and forests. So logging and so forth was a big industry. Vancouver was full of, mills and stuff. Fantastic area, really. So the west coast of Canada was one of the last places settled by European, advances of the civilization across the continent. Anyway, the forest and wandering around there by myself or with some other little 4-year-olds was just in my consciousness, and that continued. And all through my childhood into my teens and everything, it was just a necessity. And I continuously would head out into the forest alone. At one point, my family lived in an off-grid, a small, like a ski resort off-grid with that had horses as well and so forth. It was a long ways to. There were no kids around, so I was often spent my days or off day. When I wasn't at school in the nearest town, I was wandering around in the forest. So this is part of my whole life, to enjoy wandering around in the forest for hours without regard for time, without not thinking in hours, and sitting under trees, not having organized activities, just somehow just enjoying this. Humans rejoice in this. If they feel relaxed in the forest, then it's their home. This is what we are evolved out of. We're evolved out of the forest. And so that is just a theme through my whole life. And in my early 20s, again, I actually moved to a very urban area. I was a classical musician, trapped in downtown Toronto, but I would continuously look for opportunities to go out for days, weeks at a time to the forest, just to wander around in the forest and camp, and including all through the winters, the Canadian Ontario winters, which dropped to 40 below zero. And by the way, if you're American, 40 below zero Fahrenheit is the same as 40 below zero Celsius. That's where they meet. That's very convenient. 40 below is the same wherever you go. Extremely cold. But I have spent weeks out camping in that, just make a fire at night in the snow and so forth. You can be reasonably comfortable at 40 below zero. And if you have a good sleeping bag, you're fine. You survive fine. But this has just been before I was, a so-called Buddhist meditator. I did this all the time. And So when I went to be a hermit, I had all of the skills. The outdoor skills were not of any consequence. I had been out in the woods my whole life, in a sense. But to persist in it for longer than a few weeks at a time is the thing. And also to frame it, like you frame your thought processes in a Buddhist context. So that's what I did. And I was very interested and obsessed to some degree with what is called the absence of thinking, types of samadhi experiences, which are called jhana. And that was something I was cultivating very, very diligently. I was using a lot of I had one book with me primarily called the Visuddhimagga, which is a commentary from the Theravada tradition, and it's about 800 pages long. And when you have nothing else to do, you can easily read through it on many times and explore the exercises and so forth. So that's what I spent my time doing, is on these Buddhist themes. What I'm also experiencing is what happens to your mind in utter solitude when you're, weeks at a time. You won't see another human. You won't talk to anybody. There's no distractions. I didn't have a radio, of course, a television, radio, any communication form. No newspapers, no novels to read, nothing. Bare shack. So, and this is deliberate. I'm putting myself in a very deliberate way. It's not like I couldn't get a hold of those things. I could have, if I wanted to, I could have. But the whole point is to be absolutely face to face with your own existence and nothing, no distractions. So that what happens, I think, is, and you can see this in spiritual autobiographies written in different times in history as well, that weird things start to happen. Intuitions and occurrences, synchronicities, unlikely coincidences, and new thoughts, new expansive thoughts, all this kind of stuff. This happens in a kind of compressed way with people taking drugs, sometimes especially psychedelic drugs, which I didn't take. I haven't taken psychedelics in my life. But it's probably kind of tapping into circuits in a very haphazard way, which can be tapped into in deep, long-lasting, low sensory environments and solitude. And so that's quite naturally what, just new chances to observe the nature of the mind. Most people there's probably all kinds of experiences and knowledges that are arising in people's minds, but they're too busy with the outside world to notice them. And when you have no distractions, you can also access your memory in extraordinary ways. So the whole thing is more, you can't put it into a small description, a paragraph of what I did all day. the use of the mind, So I'd wander in the forest 4 or 5, especially in the first year. I'd spent maybe 6 hours wandering around in the forest in the day. It's kind of necessary, you're not going to sit just isolated in a shack all day long. So, and especially this is incredible nature. A lot of interaction with the wildlife around there. And some of it is, quite dangerous and if you consider grizzly bears dangerous. That area is right on the edge of just a dense population of grizzly bears in the higher elevations. And the lower elevations, it's merely black bears everywhere. Very, very common. Mountain lions as well. Moose and deer and all this kind of endless interactions with wildlife. British Columbia is just teeming with this stuff. And that area is just, especially at that time, was just profound wilderness. And so I'm practicing loving kindness as a protection, being careful not to, because it's wild, tumultuous mountains rising 10,000 feet and more in elevation, big slippery boulders and rushing whitewater rivers, and I'm playing around in all this stuff, in some sense playing in that environment, but you have to be very careful. If you fall and break your leg or something, that's it. Nobody's ever going to find you. So you have to be careful, and at the same time, the whole point is not to be afraid in the situation. So you're all these things. And then the other part of your question was, what do I do when I get back in the afternoons and evenings? And so I have a schedule for myself. And one thing I determined is not to go to bed before 10:30 at night. And, it's just an empty shack with a candle or a kerosene lamp and a wood stove in the winter. And that's it, So usually around 8:30 at night. And by the way, in that area, the winter, the night falls very early, 5 o'clock at night. It's pitch black, and it's the bottom of a mountainous valley as well. So you really are restricted in terms of daylight. So it's a dingy little shack, leaky shack. And so you have to keep alert and awake. You're in the evening, and so I would do some yoga in around about 8:30 at night, 8:39, maybe 45 minutes of Iyengar yoga, like holding your breath and stretching and these kind of things. And usually that kind of thing would energize me for the rest of the night. So just meditation and yoga. Sitting meditation, formal sitting meditation, usually breath meditation. Sometimes interesting new ideas and weird. When you have all the time in the world to sit there with your eyes closed, looking at your mind, you start to see things that flash before your mind that you normally would not have the capacity to pay attention to. But when there's no distractions, you start to see that there's all kinds of events going on in your mind. In an ordinary person's mind, there's all kinds of flash events, which they don't have time to register and observe and so forth. This is more like a game biologist going out into the forest in an area, and they see all kinds of things that people who have lived in that whole area haven't noticed in their whole life. It's maybe like a psychiatrist walking in downtown New York, and they're seeing all kinds of diagnosis of personality disorders and so forth that an ordinary person is just walking past and doesn't notice. Or a doctor seeing all kinds of ailments and so forth in people that ordinary people don't notice. So you have so much time to watch the mind that these things can be processed, and they're new revelations and so forth. So that's part of the meditation as well. It's astonishing. Of course, I'm guided also by access to Buddhist material there. So the type of theories of the mind and what the contents of the mind are and what they do and where they come from in Western psychology is very primitive compared to these texts. They don't, in Western psychology, we're dismissing or not able to process this because Western psychology is cultivated on normative ideas. They're not allowed to, because they're so-called scientific, they're really not allowed to report much on exceptional types of psychic events, except in the area of pathological states, mental illness and so forth, or drugged states, this kind of stuff, neurological problems. And of course, it's when you look at neurology and the kind of things that happen in brain, when the brain is being damaged or traumatized or something, remarkable things are reported there. But Buddhism is interested in kind of supernormal stuff that happens in extended periods of prolonged solitude and meditation. And they have a huge tradition of this. It's done in a very supported and healthy way. So yeah, that's the context of this. I would always try to get out. My aim was not to sleep more than 6 hours. And I was also kind of interested in going without sleep sometimes, trying to do all-night meditations and stuff, because many of the kind of hermit reports were of extended non-sleep kind of things. But it seems it's not my specialty to go without sleep. In the Thai forest tradition, the waking hour is 3 a.m. and there's one night a week where there's a group all night sitting and so forth, where you're deprived of your sleep and so forth, and etc. Those are doable, moderate kind of experiments, which go on for almost indefinitely. But yeah, it's the rough outline of this can be given, but the what goes on internally is just so vast or voluminous. The amount of information you need in order to detail any of these things is too much to put forth. So you see this in all spiritual autobiographies, at least of contemplative spiritual autobiographies, is that they can only hint at the experience. It's more or less you had to be there yourself. You have to do it yourself, and it's not for everyone. Most people I would warn against doing such things. It won't be good for you. It won't. You could be in danger. Long periods of solitude are just not what humans usually flourish under. So, unless you're very fit for this kind of experience, don't do it. Okay, well, there's 15 minutes gone. So let's go on to the next question.
Yes, Ajahn. The next question from the chat is from Fireflame. Could you talk about the importance of the precepts in the practice?
Yeah, precepts are extraordinarily important. They're the outline. They're in all types of experience, we need guidelines. If you're going to be a classical musician, you have to learn how to read music and how to stay inside the lines of that tradition. What is inappropriate when you're playing Bach or something like this? What kind of trills and ornaments are appropriate to that time? What's not appropriate? So these keep you within the lines. What the precepts really are is kind of how do you explain how a wise person sees the world to another person? How do you teach to another person how a wise person has understood life, you start from the outside. You say, well, wise people don't do this and they don't do that. So you start with what they don't do. Because lots of people do things that, because they're unwise, they do all kinds of things. And it's because they don't know any better. It's because of ignorance. So before you become wise, it will help if you kind of go through the motions, or you have the boundaries and restrictions that a wise person has intuitively. The wise person isn't abstaining from killing other living beings because it's a rule for them in life. They intuitively and out of the center of their being, they don't have any ill will or greed that would motivate them to do such a thing. They have the opposite. They have positive emotions. But we can't give you the positive emotion immediately. So you go through the exercises. You stay within the lines. This is like teaching somebody to dance by putting an outline of steps on the floor, and you put your foot in each footprint, and then slowly and mechanically, without any sense of dance, you go through the motions. And then eventually the music is added, and eventually you feel the nature of the dance, and you're no longer following these steps. You're spontaneously out of us. You realize the essence of the dance, or the essence of the music, and is what is manifesting. So the precepts are the essence of one, what stays within, because of loving kindness and wisdom. These are how these external activities of the wise, kindly person, how they navigate in life. So the precepts give you an idea. Before you're wise and kind, you get guidelines about how a wise person acts, etc. So that's why the precepts are very important. It's a great teaching method. It's how do you teach the spirit of things? You start from the outside. Yeah.
The next question from the chat is from Jimmy from California, United States. Ajahn, I feel like people eventually pull away from me even when I try to be friends. They rarely accept my invitations, to the point where I've stopped inviting anyone. Wherever I go, most people form groups and exclude me or become my enemies. As such, it often feels like the world is against me. I feel doomed if this were to continue. What can I do to fix this?
Yeah, I've seen that pattern before, and it usually goes back to childhood. I mean, from a Buddhist point of view, it goes even to previous lives, but there's not much point in talking about previous lives. But you can probably find that in childhood, that your early childhood is your parents are dysfunctional, and so they have socially alienable, or two things. One is you don't have a good model of how to behave, but the second one is that they themselves reject you. The parents, through various dysfunctional things, reject the child, and the child feels there's something wrong with them, and they would like to be accepted. They take the blame for why they're rejected, and they want to be accepted. It's very, very important for them to be accepted, and they feel it's their fault and so forth. And quite often because of the family structure, they don't have the skills, the necessary skills. And people who are raised in this sense that after a while, the person is too clinging, is too needy. So you're inviting people, and they feel like they're not in a relaxed mode with you. They feel there's something unskillful about the interactions, etc. Or you're too nervous about being accepted. So that whole thing, basically you have to go back and redo your childhood. And I would suggest also that you go to a therapist, and it doesn't have to be a Buddhist monk or anything like that. But I've seen this. This is a classic, and so what a really grown-up person is, like a fully mature person, doesn't really need company. They prefer solitude, actually. And because they're not needy and so forth, it's not that they can't be with other people, but they enjoy their own company, and they don't feel that they have to make the connection. But so you need retraining, right, starting all over again, and that's what you need to seek, is some sort of group therapy where you start from scratch and you get insights into what it is that is causing you to alienate yourself from others, why they want you. You're imposing on their boundaries somehow, and that's why they tell you to go away. Enough. You don't want to go away, and they've had enough of you. And most people can know that not to stay too long. Some people don't know that, and they get told to go away. Enough. So this is what you have to learn, is what's enough, and so forth. So, it takes retraining right from the start. Basically, I have cooked up all kinds of therapy, imaginary therapies for people. I really think that for most people who missed a portion of the early childhood with the proper triggering of affection and trust and safety, those circuits are not activated early in life when they need to be. And I don't know whether this would work, but I imagine that basically one would have to go back to almost to being an infant, and being taught what love, or safety and acceptance is, face to face with another human being. Almost you have to start as a child again. And how do you manage to do this? I mean, who has time? How much would you have to pay another adult to re-raise you? So this is how it happens. Hopefully you can find free groups. This is more, I guess, what religion is like you go back and you got a father, and religions have fathers and mothers, and kind of universal fathers and mothers where you're accepted, you're 100% accepted, you're loved, and the community around you nourishes you, and so forth. So this is, I guess, what religion does, is re-raises you. So that's, it's some sort of total immersion in a good, hopefully it's a good religion, because also cults exploit that in humans. They know that humans are lonely and so forth, and they love bomb them and so forth, but it's manipulative. The person is grateful for the love and the acceptance and so forth, but it can be manipulative as well. So this is where you have to be careful and choose your community and well, and that it's safe and non-manipulative. So religion is either some sort of group therapy or religious structure is going to be the cure for you, or the re-education of your whole entire life.
The next question from the chat is from Giancarlo from Brescia, Italy. If there is no self, anatta, then by simply realizing that truth, there should be no suffering. Therefore, realization of anatta alone should be the only path to nibbana. What is wrong with this interpretation?
Yeah, the problem is about this. What is it to realize? And so, what is it? I can intellectually tell you that there's no self, and I think a lot of people in the modern world, if you're not from a religious background that has this idea of a soul or something like that, in the modern psychology, and they talk about your ego and your id and your superego or your personality structures. But most modern psychology doesn't think there's a little person inside you that's real. They realize that the sense of self is shaped by nature, natural psychology, but also the social surroundings, your parents, and the culture you're in is why you are what you are. And they also say, well, if you go to a different culture, you're going to change, and if you get different ideas, it's going to change you. And if certain, if you get an injury to the brain or something, that's going to change you as well. So in modern philosophy and psychology, there's no conviction that there's a real enduring self. There's just processes. So lots of people know that. So are they enlightened now? No, because the processes, it's the implication of the processes. The Buddha, by the way, so the anatta is a refutation, meaning not self, or no, basically no, there isn't a self, which is a very important theory in Indian philosophy before and during the lifetime of the Buddha. There is a deep conviction throughout and to this day of this thing. This is Atman, Atman meaning the self, Atman, Atman, and in Pali it's Atta, Atta, but it's what we in the West would call a soul theory. So this is what the Buddha feels is an impediment to understanding. It is an attempt to explain something. What is it attempting to explain? One thing is, how do you endure past this life? If we're not simply annihilated at the end of this life, then how do we persist? And who is it that persists, or what is it that persists? So it would be, there's a folk intuition of a me. Yeah, me. I persist. So the Buddha is examining this. When you talk about me, what do you mean? What do you mean you? And by the way, he says the ordinary person just points at their body. Well, this is me, And then, but the smarter type, the intellectual, points as in my mind. I am my mind, not my body. I'm my mind. And he says of the two, actually, the person who points at their body is more accurate because the body kind of changes slowly, but the mind changes with the rapidity of lightning. So that's even less of a coherent explanation of who you are. Your mind is this endless and rapid fire flow of thoughts and feelings and so forth and perceptions. And your body is also an endless flow of change, but it's a little slower. So that's why we recognize somebody next year, after, with a 2-year-old, you can, at 3, you might not, an adult might not recognize them if they haven't seen them for a year. They're just, the body changes so fast. But once you're 20 and then 21, it's, somebody a year later will recognize you, but maybe not 30 years later. So the body, he's saying, look, there's nothing that corresponds to this naive philosophical concept of a self as a enduring entity, like an unchanging, eternal, immortal entity. He's just criticizing the whole idea. So now that he's cleared the decks of this as an explanation, and then but his primary interest is in the end of suffering. It's not in an anatta. There's three characteristics that you're moving towards. Anicca, dukkha, anatta. Anicca is impermanence, dukkha is suffering, anatta is non-self. So it's not about, we're not interested in arriving at non-self, we're interested at arriving at non-suffering. And non-self is a means to the end of non-suffering. But there's a whole path which has to reshape your attitudes towards the processes which are generally called you. So there's a body and feelings, perceptions, consciousness, volitional, decision making and so forth. These are what is generally called you, but it's a river of events, and those are approximately real, but this is where the suffering takes place, and in the attitudes towards those 5 rivers of events. So you have to undo all of the implications of this, why you suffer. So anatta is part of the solution, the full realization of anatta. So all of them converge at some point. They converge, but impermanence, suffering, and this insubstantiality of self converge in a moment which would be called enlightenment. And the true sign of whether you have understood this is that the psychological dimension of suffering disappears. But it requires a full insight into all 3 of these characteristics. Yeah. Let's go on to the next question. And Metta has we're getting over long, I think maybe COVID or something like that. Like, we were in Seattle, by the way. So if you want to see what we were up to last week, we were down in Seattle with the Clear Mountain Monastery Project, that community in Seattle. Very nice young monks that are building a community down there, and it's a very exciting project going on, and we were invited down there and to visit and give talks and so forth, and so we brought our cameras along and recorded some things, which you can see. Some of the events are on our channel, and some of them are on the Clear Mountain Monastery Project channel. So check that out on YouTube, the Clear Mountain Monastery Project. And of course, I don't travel much or go outside of the community very much here. And so when I step out into there and crowds at airports and people breathing in your face, and I'm always when I go through the border, they're always checking me over, and and then when we give talks and so forth, people come up to me and talk, 3 feet away from me, and etc. So pretty inevitable that when I travel, we pick up something. So I think, and we both picked up this. And it's been more than a week now. So Metta's voice is a little cracked back there, and mine is a little bit cracked as well. So that's the explanation. But Metta, what is the next question?
Yes, Ajahn Sona. The next question from the chat is from Monica from Calgary. How to build a marriage based on Dhamma? Is it contrary to reducing attachment?
Well, there are burdens in the household life and in the married life, there are burdens, extraneous distractions, etc. I mean, even in monastic life, not all monasteries are equal, and in their situation for monks and nuns to practice in, and at various times in the arc of the development of a monastery, there's busy times and distracted times, and sometimes it's a small ideal place. You will see this in the suttas where perfect monasteries are described. There's a sutta called this Gosinga Wood sutta, where 3 monks are living in this ideal isolation. They don't have any burdens or problems. And then monasteries where there's, difficult people and it's surrounded by crowds and it's too noisy and all this kind of stuff. So, yeah, each person will have their karmic dilemma. If the marriage is based on Dhamma and good practice, both participants, it will certainly be much more uplifting and sustaining than one that is dysfunctional and all kinds of negative stuff. If one person is a Dhamma practitioner, the other one is, materialist and doesn't have the same ethics and so forth, then it's going to be an impediment to the practice. So the Buddha is always saying, surround yourself with people on the same wavelength, and please don't associate with the foolish. And the foolish are those who are unethical and intoxicated and so forth. And so, yeah, it can be a great help if your spouse is a wise and kind person. They can be a great help to you. If not, they can be a great impediment to you. And if the two of you are good, and then it's going to be a nice thing. It's going to be a nice thing for each of you, and it's also going to be a nice model for others to emulate as well. The Buddha says there's 4 kinds of marriages. The man is a demon, and the woman's an angel. The woman's a demon, and the man's an angel. They're both demons, and then they're both angels. So there's 4 possibilities there. If you can get in the one where you're both angels, that's the good one. Yeah. Yeah.
The next question from the live chat is from Cedar Elm. Can you please talk about accumulating merits? I'm to understand that if one does prostrations, water offerings, and purifications are dharmic aspirations like finding a teacher, could be realized, I believe. Let's see. If one does merit accumulation, how does that work if I'm empty?
Well, we have to understand. Read the whole question again, the whole thing, every last word of it.
Okay, and there's a couple of questions that kind of. Okay, so let me start here. Can you please talk about accumulating merits? Oops. Jeez. I'm to understand that if one does prostrations, water offerings, and purifications are dharmic aspirations, like finding a teacher could be, if one does merit accumulation, how does that work if I am empty?
Yeah, I would. Those are the prostrations, water offerings, etc. Not the most effective. Merit is done through acts of generosity, and also, so primarily through acts of generosity. So do acts of charity, and that will become fulfilling to the heart as well, to get you out of yourself and sharing and giving, to others as well. And that's how you develop very positive energies. And then the next level is with your mind. So if you can generate some goodwill, even for a finger snap. So the Buddha is saying this, generating true goodwill for for all beings for a finger snap is one of the most meritorious developments in your life, and out of that will have enormous positive repercussions. And the mere act of prostrations and so forth is not it's not a mechanical way of generating merit. It's got to be an act with the heart of generosity, sharing food with others. Just offer something at the food bank, or if there's a monastery nearby, if you offer a meal, invite your friends to a meal, and just offer food, even to animals. Go to the dog shelter and feed the dog, or take it for a walk, or things like this. These are meritorious acts, and will put you on the path to good things. And when you generate these things, you'll start to recognize it in others, that others have amazing skills with generosity, and it's very a beautiful, something that's very beautiful in a person. So you're looking for the beautiful. And this is going to fill you. You're not going to be empty at all. You're going to be full of merit by doing this. So you look for opportunities to help others, to share and be generous, and to practice goodwill instead of the hostility or these negative emotions of depression and boredom and sadness and hostility. These are all negative things which will accumulate demerit, and the opposite of goodwill and cheering yourself up and being generous is going to generate positive energy in yourself. Merit is another word for energy, or happiness in a sense. Merit is another word for happiness. The Buddha himself says this. You'll make yourself happy by this, and the happiness will keep flowering and generating. So don't worry too much about prostrations or water offerings or anything. Just do what the whole world understands as good and beautiful. That is generosity. Every religion understands this, and as you see it all throughout the world, and where people don't understand this and they're stingy and they don't help and they're angry and everything, that's like ugly. It's very, very ugly. And they don't have a good future. They can't. Nobody wants them. Nobody cares. Nobody wants you. So if you're generous and kind, and then it's delight. You're a delight to others. Yeah.
The next question from the chat is from Alit. How does one skillfully leave a partner in order to ordain?
Well, it can be a terrible tangle. Every story that of leaving, if you happen to be from a good, faithful Buddhist family, and you announce that you're the son that is going off to be a monk, well, you'll just get nothing but congratulations and so forth. They'll support it and everything. But if you're in a relationship and then you have to depart, it's hard, including the Buddha himself. So before he was the Buddha, he was the Bodhisattva, and he had a young wife. They'd been married. The two of them were married at 16 years old. One of these arranged marriages, I'm sure. And apparently the stories go that they had a long history. This isn't the first life they've been together, and so it must have been a terrible decision. And he left on the night of his first child's birth, according to the stories. Well, that must have been that wasn't nice. That was a mess, a mess for everybody. And I'm also leaving in the midst of a non-Buddhist culture. I had to find my way out into the robes in a non-Buddhist culture. So there's all kinds of tangles and misunderstandings, etc., along the way. So don't expect people to understand. And even in the time of the Buddha, the whole family would resist. There was one guy who had 4 wives. He was married to 4 wives. and he decided he had attained some stage of enlightenment, and he wanted to go forth as a monk, and his parents wouldn't let him, and he had to fast until near death in order to get their permission to go forth, and just terrible tangles. So don't expect it to be easy. Nobody said it was going to be easy. There's no magic formula. The other person might be very attached and grasping and doesn't understand it, and nobody said they should, and that's the situation in life, Yeah.
The next question from the live chat is from Quasator from Melbourne, Australia. Is an Arya with spontaneous jhana likely to be reborn into a corresponding jhana realm, or is their path progression likely to result in a human rebirth?
Yeah, in the first two stage, the Arya is meaning enlightened, some stage of the enlightenment path. So first and second stage, they could be reborn into a jhanic realm, a samadhi realm. One of the higher heavens are based on this accomplishment of the mind, this entering into the jhanas, or these deep samadhi, deep concentration, stillness of mind. And so it's they could spend time there and not be immediately reborn in the human realm. Yeah. So I also remind everybody that there's a video we put out a couple weeks ago called Greek and Persian Influence on Early Indian Buddhism, the earliest Western monks, which is available on this channel and has been up there for 2 weeks. And it's an hour and 24 minutes long, a very detailed look at the big picture of the East at the time and the interaction of Greek and Persian culture and empire, etc., on India, and the consequences also of the importation of simply of writing into India, and the writings that begin to appear in the Asokan Empire, on the Asokan pillars, and where the influences which the Asokan pillars owe a debt of or owe their existence on interactions with Greek and Persian Empire, etc. So please watch that and see the big picture of things. Just a reminder. And we're kind of into a field where, so Metta, who's behind the microphone, she's the videographer on there. She does all of the elaborate imagery and so forth, and editing the audio and so forth. So we're in a new phase of skills with cameras and computers and stuff for more inquiry into these areas. Yeah, so keep in tune for the channel. Now we're into the summer here. We're into July now. So, and Metta will be going off to her home in Portland pretty soon. And we hope to see some formal Dhamma talks, which I've given meditation Dhamma talks to retreats, will be posted more so for the summer than these live Q&As. But these are all on the schedule. So keep an eye on the channel. All kinds of new and divergent, diverse kind of topics will be explored on this channel going into the future. And some of them are already recorded and just need tidying up and editing and so forth. And they will appear over the next couple of years, I suppose. Yes. So I think we will wrap it up for today, and we'll be seeing you next week in some form or another. Maybe Q&A, maybe not, but something will be posted, yeah.